Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome back to the Film Theory Reaction, and this is Zootopia's Disturbing Secret. Okay, I'm genuinely wondering what they mean by this, because, like, is this going to be one of those theories, like, oh, the predators are actually eating the, the herbivores or something like that, because I think that was, like, actually proven false. Like, I think I think they do the whole thing where, like all the predators eat, it was essentially, like, either, like, tofu or, like, it's, like, made out of, like, processed bugs or something like that. Unless, like, that's not the secret they're talking about. Because, I mean, again, like, I know I know bits of the initial concept when it was known as Zootropolis. It was darker then. Unless this is talking specifically about something that's happening in, like, Zootopia 2, which I don't actually know that much about. I've been kind of avoiding the trailers because I just don't like Disney. I mean, granted, I have seen a lot of people talking about the trailers, especially, a lot of people talking about that at least from what's shown in the trailer, it's more heavily hinted at that, Judy and Nick are, in fact, a couple, or at least people have been interpreting things as them being a couple. And then there's that whole thing with the snake or something. Honestly, I don't know. I actually, the more I think about it, the more I'm curious as to what this supposedly disturbing secret even is. So I mean, yeah, might as well stop wasting time. Let's actually get into this then. So yeah, of course, as always, original videos linked in the description if you haven't seen it yet for some reason. Corner video lead to my game theory reaction. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel, because almost 3/4 of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I'd very much like that to change, because I'm trying to see how close to 7,000 subscribers I can get before the end of the year. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
Zootopia is doomed. Yeah, though you might look at this happy-go-lucky city of Disney animal people and think it's a utopia, it's not. If a place like this actually existed scientifically, it would be on the brink of collapse without enough food, and its people might have to resort to the darkest option.
Okay, never mind. Ignore what I said before.
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that would absolutely be an anthropomorphized Saint Bernard. I'll bring you the subscribe button when you're trapped up on the mountain and in dire need of help. Go on, take it! So today we're pulling a bit of a Disney, friends, and how is that? Well, it's because after 9 long years, we're finally getting to a sequel to one of our biggest theories ever, Zootopia. Yeah, along with Disney revisiting this world with its sequel, I wanted to make another theory about it. And fun fact, but that first Zootopia theory is legit the 5th most viewed video on this entire channel. And let's just say that 2016 thumbnails were something else, huh? In case you never got this one on your radar, or it's just been a while, Zootopia is the story of Judy Hopps, an anthropomorphic rabbit from a small town who has big dreams of becoming the first rabbit police officer in Zootopia, a large city where all sorts of animals live in harmony. Throughout the film, she ends up forming an unlikely partnership with Nick Wilde, a red fox and one of the city's resident con men. And together they unravel a massive conspiracy and bust a government-led cabal out to frame all predators as violent. They then save the city and tons of innocent people and end the film as official partners on the Zootopia police force. The film was surprisingly great, one of my personal favorites from the House of Mouse in the last decade, and it's one of the internet's favorites too. Yeah, this one spawned a lot of fan fiction, like a lot of fan fiction. Too much, some would say. Enough that Disney sat down to make some officially sanctioned fan fiction with the sequel because, hey, they want more money. But you know what? Where some might see a cynical cash grab sequel, I see an opportunity to dive back into an interesting world with an old school theory. See, if you sit down and look at the world of Zootopia, how the city is built, how its people interact, and how you'd even think about supplying such a diverse range of animals, the city is sitting on the edge of a crisis and they don't even realize it. Yeah, friends, this is as classic a film theory as film theory can be. Looking at this fun, creative, silly, fictional world and taking it as seriously and scientifically as possible. And at the other end of that, well, Zootopia Zootopia is doomed. And the only thing that might save it from its biggest problems? Cannibalism. Well, kind of. Man, science-y and a dark Disney theory? You're getting a 2 for loyal theorists. So without further ado, let's do further.
Okay, let's see where this goes.
Why Zootopia is doomed. Reason number 1, weather modification. Let's kick off this indictment by hopping into our police chopper and getting an aerial view of the entire city these films take place in, shall we? The main portion of Zootopia is broken up into 4 sections, or districts. To the west, you have the hot and humid rainforest district. To the east, you have the arid Sahara Square and Arctic Tundra Town. And finally, in the middle, you have Savannah Central, the actual city part of the city, where most of the first movie's plot takes place.
Okay, so at least a part of this, they're going to be talking about the whole thing that, tundra, again, the whole thing is like, you have this one area that's permanently kept cold, the other part that's kept really dry, and of course, they're going to be putting ultra-real logic on how this is a literal impossibility. So, again, I do love the whole thing that, they have the snowblowers pointing one way, and then, all the heat that the snowblowers suck out is being pushed the other way, which, again, I like it. It's super susceptible to, any form of power fluctuation if there is a power outage, unless this whole thing is on its own separate power grid.
Now, at first, having all of these diverse habitats all packed into one area makes perfect sense from a world-building perspective. If I were trying to design a fantastical city built for all sorts of mammals, from rabbits and jaguars to camels and polar bears, this is exactly where I'd land. It's only natural, pun intended, that there are different ecosystems for the different citizens. It's creative and fun. But the how they would make this happen would be a disaster. Near the beginning of the movie, when Judy first travels to Zootopia, we see her go on a bit of a train tour across the city's different districts. Outside of the city, we see a temperate climate, similar to the American Midwest, maybe something closer to the Pacific Northwest. But as Judy enters the city, we first see Sahara Square before passing into Tundra Town. And as we make that transition, we get a look at this. This is what is known as the climate wall, a huge, skyscraper-high array of heaters that blows hot air into Sahara Square while simultaneously blasting cold air into Tundra Town. And later in that same scene, when Judy's train moves into the rainforest district, we see that the rain in this rainforest is actually mostly caused by giant sprinklers hidden up in the trees. Of course, these biomes recreate a lot of the natural habitat to the peoples of Zootopia, so they can feel comfortable in the city. They can wear what makes them feel natural. All of those little details are, like I said, creative and fun, but they also tell us something important. None of these districts are natural. None of them are supposed to be here. They're all man-made, or mammal-made, I guess.
They're artificial and manufactured.
Of these landscapes, we're being told that the land of Zootopia isn't a magical world where deserts and rainforests and the Arctic all converge. No.
Yeah, Zootopia is not in fact built on the borders of several biomes like in Minecraft.
Instead, it looks like Zootopia, and the people who made it have gone out of their way to artificially carve out all of these little ecosystems to create the perfect environments for their inhabitants and their needs. On the one hand, you gotta give the engineers who made this happen some props. That takes
definitely some mega project level stuff there.
Off, something that we are nowhere near able to do to this degree, pun intended, in our own real world. But as you can imagine, messing with the natural climate of an ecosystem this much isn't gonna come without some drawbacks. Like some major drawbacks.
Yeah.
And all of that meddling with nature would only make life for all Zootopians much, much worse. Let's start off with the climate wall, shall we? Honestly, inspired idea, but just think for a second about how something like this would actually function.
Again, I'm imagining super powerful, air conditioners, refrigerators, freezers, again, blowing all the cold out one way and all the heat out the other. The only thing is I can imagine the absolutely monstrous power consumption of something like that. So I'm guessing either 1 or 2 nuclear reactors dedicated to powering this one thing alone.
I tried to dig up any information about the actual mechanics of the climate wall, but all I could find was this infographic explaining that it has heaters on one side and snowblowers on the other. It's very helpful. So what we're gonna do here is assume that this thing works a little bit like a refrigerator. Now, this is very simplified, but your fridge doesn't actually just make things cold. It actually sucks the heat out of the stuff inside and then dissipates that heat out of the back. So it's cold on one side and warm on the other. It kind of sounds like the climate wall, right? Well,
which is one of those things I've always wondered about, when it comes to refrigerators and freezers. With some people, it's just up against the back wall and then it's open at the top, so you have some air circulation going on there. But, like, I've seen some houses, including, the kitchen in our house, where, like, the fridge itself is sort of, like, set back into an alcove in the wall. So, like, I mean, granted, I wasn't responsible for designing it, but, like, it must get really warm back there.
First things first here, that would not be great because it would use a huge amount of energy, like a massive
what I
amount.
just said.
Just one refrigerator can account for anywhere between 7 to 20% of a household's entire electricity consumption. They take a lot of power to run, and that's just one human-sized one. Imagine scaling that up to the size of several buildings. Now, sure, that would have a terrible impact on the environment just from trying to generate that much electricity, but even worse for this environment? Well, think about it. Part of the purpose of the climate wall is to blast hot air into Sahara Square. But do you know what happens to hot air, loyal theorists?
It rises.
When air heats up, it expands, making it less dense than the air around it, and thus it floats. That's actually how hot air balloons work. But that also means that the air in Sahara Square would be hotter than all of the air around it, and it would literally be sucked into the sky, creating a little bit of a vacuum effect on the ground. And that
Yeah, so thinking about that would mean that Sahara Square would be exceedingly windy at all times as, you have new, fresh, colder air rushing in to fill it in, which, given that you literally have, Tundra Town right next to it, which is kept at sub-zero temperatures, I mean, maybe that's part of the reason why the wall's there, just to act as a windbreak.
That means that the air from the surrounding areas, like Tundra Town, Savannah Central, and the southeast would flood in, creating massive wind and dust storms. That massive upswell of wind would also carry a lot of the sand and dust from Sahara Square into the sky. And what goes up must come down. This would bathe not only Sahara Square, but all of Zootopia in a continuous cloud of sand. And if you believe that it would just come back down on Sahara Square and nothing else, think again. IRL, millions of tons of sand from the actual Sahara Desert are carried by the wind over to the Americas each year.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the reasons why, I think if I remember correctly, that's one of the reasons why the Amazon rainforest and other rainforests in that area are so, like, lush and stuff like that, because the sand is carried over and basically acts as fertilizer, along with other things, but still, it's cool.
Going over a few city blocks, that would be nothing. In the end, this excess sand would pollute water, damage machinery and windows, and even cause eye and lung problems for the most vulnerable Zootopians. And even worse, but when that warm air from the desert meets the cold air coming from Tundra Town, that would create what is known as a front. And depending on how those two masses of air would interact with each other, that could create a whole host of weather conditions that could change in the blink of an eye. Think thunderstorms, hailstorms, and even tornadoes. Maybe trying to squeeze deserts and the Arctic next to each other was kind of a bad idea. And all of it without mentioning the Rainforest District's sprinklers and their flood of problems. Literally. See, you can't just take a normal forest, add a bunch of rain, and call it a rainforest. Those are completely different types of woodland.
I mean, granted, there are, like, rainforests, like, don't have to be tropical. I mean, you only have to go, you only have to go to, like, the west coast of Canada and the United States, where, like, over there, like, on BC and other areas like that, they're known as temperate rainforests. But again, it's all about the species of plants and stuff that actually live there and stuff like that. Because, like, most plants aren't evolved to receive, massive amounts of rain and stuff like that. Otherwise, their roots can rot. I mean, example, we have, like, 3... Christmas, or not really Christmas cactuses, Thanksgiving cactuses, in the stairwell to our house. We barely ever water those. We water them where, what tells us to water them is when you touch the dirt in the pot and it feels rock hard. That is when you water them. And because of that, they absolutely thrive. If you overwater them, they die in an instant.
Plants that live in tropical rainforests have evolved for millions of years to survive the high temperatures and constant rainfall. As just one example, many plants in rainforests, like the Amazon, have evolved to have waxy leaves and pointed tips that allow water to wick off, preventing them from being weighed down by the excess water. And so, if Zootopia did just take an ordinary forest and started making it rain, well, anyone who's overwatered a houseplant can tell you what will happen. Now,
but I mean, you can look, they've transplanted actual, like, rainforest fauna here, or flora, not fauna,
Sure, if you're Zootopia, you could just tear down whatever forest used to be there and replace it with plants from another rainforest. But you know what you can't replace? The soil. See, rainforest soil is just built different. Typically, the soil in rainforests tends to be more acidic, and it lacks a bunch of nutrients compared with ordinary soil. But it's also very porous, meaning that it allows more water to just flow through it. So if Zootopia's plan is to just sprinkle water over a forest and call it a day, even if they replaced every tree, blade of grass, and shrub, they'd still have to wrestle with the comparatively less porous soil and having the need for the water to go somewhere. And that
God, okay, that's one of those things that, like, again, I love film theory and game theory. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't do reactions to them. But at the same time, it's stuff like this that you can't help but, like, want to punch them. Because, like, again, you only have to look at Zootopia to know, like, oh, hey, like, this wasn't just an overnight job. Like, obviously, oh, the rainforest section of the town is, you know, manufactured and fake. But it's like you just only have to look at it to show that, like, oh, hey, they've done a lot more than just add sprinklers and replace plants. Like, you look at the absolute size of the district. Like, literally, you look at it, it takes up, like, almost, like, a third of the entire area of, you know, Zootopia. And, like, I'd imagine, and obviously, Zootopia wasn't built overnight. You'd have to imagine that it was built over years and years with, like, expanding, you know, the various, you know, ecological areas and stuff like that. And so I would very much imagine that huge amounts of, like, underground either drainage or, I mean, like, at first I was going to think, oh, what if they just replaced all the dirt with, like, with a more porous, you know, equivalent. Like, no, even in, like, a more fantasy-like world like Zootopia, I wouldn't see them going that far. But if you're specifically have an entire section of your city that's supposed to, like, mimic the rainforest, you know, proper drainage, it was something that was thought up was, like, one of the absolute first things they thought up when they were designing the city. Or at least that district of the city.
That would mean excess runoff into the nearby river and, of course, massive flooding into the densely populated Savannah Central. Unpredicted weather events? Check. Constantly coating your city with sand? Check. Accidentally flooding your lowlands in order to create an artificial rainforest? Check. Turns out trying to speed run changing the climate wouldn't be a smart idea. But of course, no place is more symbolic of Zootopia's effect on the environment than its central location, Savannah Central. Rapid expansion. Ironically, one of the biggest challenges that the city of Zootopia has to face is its own success. I mean, just look at Savannah Central from an aerial view. This place is huge. As the creators of Zootopia have come out and said, they took inspiration for the design of Zootopia from many different metropolitan cities, namely Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Brasilia, as well as the usual suspects you might expect like LA, London, New York, and Paris. The creators have also said that they wanted Zootopia not to feel like an American city, but a world city, a real melting pot where species of all kinds can live together peacefully. But of course, as you'd expect, trying to build a city that can house a variety of different mammals comes with its own challenges. For example, size. Zootopia needs to be accommodating for mammals of all sizes, from the tiniest mouse to the largest elephant. One obvious way this happens is through public transportation. As we see in the beginning of the movie, before Judy hops aboard the train to Zootopia, we see multiple doors open allowing various sized animals to disembark. Now, of course, that's a simple enough fix, and a necessary one for Zootopia to truly be inclusive. But it's not just public transportation where the size differences between animals can become a problem. Take Judy and Nick's cop car. The cars in this universe need to allow for both bigger wildebeests and rhinos, but also foxes and rabbits to operate them safely. So is that like a feature I can upgrade in this car? Or do they sell like separate cars for small, medium, and large creatures?
I mean, given what we actually see in the movie, I would assume both. Because, like, we see, you know, very small cars and also that little, like, cop tripod or speeder thing that, you know, Judy was driving when she was just, you know, doing parking tickets. But at the same time, we see Judy sitting in that full-size car, so I'd imagine, like, there's some sort of, like, booster seat or addition that was plugged into it to allow, like, her to actually manipulate the pedals and stuff like that and, you know, sit over and see over the steering wheel.
And this would not just be true for cars, but for housing as well. Heck, there's an entire neighborhood in Zootopia, Little Rodentia, that is miniaturized so the rodent citizens can avoid getting stepped on. Everything that has to be created in Zootopia needs to be made with these different sizes in mind, which would complicate supply chains and just be a big headache for any product designers or city planners. And there would be a real problem with the population. See, we've talked about this before, but animals of vastly different sizes can take wildly different times to make offspring. Sure, it might take a rhino 15 or 16 months to have a child, but rats reach maturity at just 9 weeks old. Female rats can give birth to around 5 to 12 pups per litter, and they can have over 6 litters per year.
And then, there's rabbits, where they literally make a joke about that in the beginning of the movie.
That means that one pair of rat parents can, if the conditions are right, produce over 1,250 different offspring per year.
Yes, but again, like you're kind of forgetting the fact that these aren't wild animals here. These are sapient anthropomorphic animals here that live in a capitalistic society. The main thing that, there's a reason why many developed nations do not have replacement level birth rates, and that's because raising a child is expensive. I would imagine in a civilization or a city like, Zootopia, stuff like contraceptives or, the day after pill or whatever the equivalent is in their universe are still a thing. So while it is possible, I don't think it's necessarily going to happen because, again, having kids is expensive.
Obviously, things might be different in the world of Zootopia, and any rodent characters might not want to have that many kids that fast, but this is something that the people running Zootopia would have to keep in mind. And there's evidence in this world that the populations would grow rapidly, all thanks to other mammals that famously breed quickly. Some would say, like rabbits. Let's take Judy's family and her hometown as an example. They don't technically live in Zootopia proper, but instead around 200 miles away in Bunnyboro. And the thing about this little rural town is that it's packed. We know from the movie that Judy has around 275 brothers and sisters, but during the first movie, as Judy leaves, we see this sign that keeps an updated tally of the entire population of Bunnyboro, and it says that there are 81 million people? In comparison, the most populated city in the world in 2018 was Tokyo, Japan, with 37 million people, and this is a rural town with 81 million. Obviously, the size difference of rabbits and humans would contribute to that, but oh my gosh. If that is how many people live out here in the sticks, what the heck is the population of Zootopia as a whole? Like a billion? And while that might sound ridiculous, that does track with how fast rabbits can reproduce in the real world.
Yeah, again, that is one of those things. I think, what is it, like a female rabbit can get impregnated as soon as she's given birth or something like that. Now, then again, that does raise the question, like, how are, Judy's parents, affording, to raise that many kids and, in a rural city, or in a rural town, I should say, and has her father never heard of condom before?
According to one calculation made by a professor out of the University of Miami, one single pair of breeding rabbits can create a colony of as many as 184 million descendants in just 7 years. So that 81 million is the more reasonable number compared to the real world. Factoring in the other rabbits and rats and all the other rodents that reproduce quickly, let alone all the other animals, Zootopia is going to become very cramped very soon if it isn't already. And judging by how densely packed the city already seems, where else can they build into, unless they tear down the other habitats they've worked so hard to build?
I mean, have you looked at the city? The obvious answer is up, because have you seen the absolute size of some of those buildings?
But while unpredictable weather and predictable population booms are no doubt problems, they could theoretically be solved with a bit of ingenuity. It wouldn't be easy, don't get me wrong, but Zootopia has managed to come up with interesting solutions for their challenges so far. Perhaps they could overcome this. But there is another problem that wouldn't be so easily solved, and this one would be the end of the city: food insecurity. As we discussed many times throughout this episode, Zootopia is meant to be, well, a utopia, a place where all mammals, both predator and prey, are able to live in harmony. And all of this is only possible because, in Zootopia, predators don't hunt and eat prey anymore. Well, unless they're affected by the night howlers, but that was a whole thing, don't worry about it. Yet, this did get me wondering, if they don't eat meat, what do the predators eat? Like, sure, I get that some animals, like foxes, are omnivores, so they can easily switch between eating bunnies to eating berries. But what about the carnivores? The world of Zootopia is filled with lions and cheetahs and the like that have to eat meat to survive. They don't have a choice, it's how their bodies are built. But thankfully, once again, the creators of Zootopia were able to shed
what was I talking about at the beginning of this video?
They've confirmed that the predators, along with eating plants and the occasional donut, do dine on fish and insects to get their fill of protein. I guess the bugs and fish aren't sentient enough to avoid getting eaten, huh? If so, that might be awkward. Anyway, at first, that seems like a pretty reasonable explanation for how the predators are able to get the meat that they need. But if you start to overthink this, to take this concept just one step further, the entire world falls apart. To understand why, let's imagine back to what this world was like before predators and prey lived in peace, shall we? The predators ate the prey, and the prey ate the plants, berries, and such. Circle of life, Elton John, all that jazz. Now, imagine what happens when the predators decide that they're not going to eat the prey anymore, and instead they're going to feast on the exact same food as the prey. And here's where the problems begin.
Okay, well, I mean, I can potentially see the problems here because, one, like, you only have to look at, state parks in the U.S. and stuff like that, where they had the wolf populations killed. The deer just ended up eating everything, and they had to actually reintroduce wolves to actually save the vegetation. But at the same time, again, this is a sentient society with farming. We see that. So, I mean, of course you have fish farms. You can set up insect farms. And again, insects breed even quicker than, small mammals. Plus, I mean, like, you have all that waste, all the poop. You can very much, like, how many different species of bug could you and plant could you, how many different species of bug and plant could you grow and survive just off of that? And, garbage and stuff like that. On top of, like, stuff like garbage. So it's like, it's not impossible. And if this isn't, and, like, again, this is one of those things that, like, he's talking as if, like, Zootopia is, like, the only place on the planet that does stuff like this, where predators and herbivores live in peace and stuff like that. But, like, you'd have to imagine there are other places on the planet that do this. There are other places on the planet that grow crops for herbivores, or other places where they've set up, like factory farms for insects, or they have, like, fish farms for, fish and stuff like that. Again, like, I very highly doubt that they're growing any, if much, food in the city itself. I mean, like, what city does? That's kind of the job of rural communities to do that.
Where, in the real world, someone like Officer Clawhauser would have eaten Judy, and Judy would have eaten the plants and donuts. Now everyone is fighting over the small supply of donuts, plants, insects, and fish. That means that Zootopia is going to be going through their finite supply of food at a faster rate than before.
But again, you're acting like, other places aren't shipping it in. Like, again, you're acting like Zootopia is producing all the food itself. What is with this?
In fact, we even see from the final trailer for Zootopia 2 that Zootopians have turned extracting fish into an automated process, presumably to keep the predators' appetites in check. But since everyone is now eating from that same pool of resources, suddenly food supplies are going to dwindle over time.
Okay, wait a second. Why is Dash and Judy, and I'm forgetting his name. What is he doing here? They're herbivores. Why are they on the fish line?
Combine that with the fact that Zootopia's population is only set to explode from here, like we laid out earlier. More and more animals fighting over a smaller and smaller food supply. It's essentially like the predators were just wiped out of the food chain, which sounds like it would be good for everyone in the environment, but in an ironic twist of fate, removing predators from the food chain, like what happens in Zootopia, would actually make an environment less healthy. In fact, and this is true, it can literally affect the flow of rivers. Really? In Yellowstone National Park, there used to be a lot
Hey,
of
I know
wolves in
this.
the landscape prior to the 1920s, but when humans moved in, the wolves were considered a nuisance, and they were hunted down and removed from the park. That essentially removed the top predator from the environment, which kicked off a domino effect that, in an ironic twist of fate, made Yellowstone less hospitable to life. You see, the wolves played an important part in that ecosystem. They ate the elk, which in turn ate the grass. So with wolves, the elk's main predator, out of the way, the elk population exploded, which in turn led to the grass in the area being depleted. This led to more erosion into nearby rivers, making it dirty and less suitable for fish. Basically, the environment was destroyed by taking out the top level predator. Now, compare that scenario to what happened in Zootopia. Not only have the top predators been removed from the environment, just like the wolves, but in turn, those same predators are now fighting for the same foods as the prey. That'd be like, instead of getting rid of the wolves, if the wolves also started eating the grass. It only serves to make a precarious situation much, much worse. And the absolute cherry on top of this disaster sundae, Judy and Nick, yes, our protagonists from the franchise, through their actions in the first movie, might have accidentally made this food insecurity issue even more dire. Remember how Judy and Nick helped break up that drug ring? Well, the drug was called Night Howler. It turned predators aggressive, but it also had a secret second use, as a pesticide. That's right, in the first movie, we learned that Judy's parents, who are produce farmers, also used the night howlers as a way to keep bugs off their crops. And so, after Judy exposed the city's government and revealed the dangerous effects of the night howlers, I wouldn't be shocked if night howlers became straight up illegal after the events of that first film. That would mean that the Hops family farm would have one less insecticide to keep their crops safe, and that means that if they don't find an alternative, there will be a decrease in the supply of produce they're able to, well, produce, leading to even less food being available and making things more precarious. And so, what's their solution? How do they fix this existential threat? What could they possibly do to save Zootopia from its doom? Well, if you look back at our example of the Yellowstone wolves, there is one option, but most of the people of Zootopia aren't going to like it. See, in the 90s, scientists reintroduced wolves back to Yellowstone, and they went ham. Naturally, with their predator back in the food chain, the elk population went down, which sucked for the elk, sure, but it led to the grass in the area flourishing once again. And all in all, it made the entire environment more sustainable. More or less, since all of the people of Zootopia are sentient creatures, they'd have to resort to cannibalism. Barry the bear hanging out with his friends Otto the otter and Randy the rat until he gets hungry enough for lunch. Obviously, there'd be some absolutely terrible issues that would come along with this reintroduction of the predator-prey system into this world. And I mean, it would also go against the entire point and message of the movie, but if you look at the scientific reality of the world of Zootopia set up here, they are going to have to find some solutions for their problems, because if things go south, if food supplies dwindle away, some old habits might start to rear their ugly heads. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. Up next.
Okay. Yeah, so that's definitely one way of looking at things. Again, like, the way this whole theory goes about it, especially the food section, the way it goes about the whole thing is in the fact that, I can totally get behind, the whole thing is like, the unpredictable weather modification and, the supply chains. I can totally get behind, the weather modification going bad. That makes total sense. But, the second part with, like, birth rates and the third part with the food supply, like, it falls flat when you remember that these are sapient creatures. They're not just wild animals going on instinct doing everything to survive. These are, like, sapient beings living in a civilized society with modern technology. Like, the fact, like... yeah, like, this whole video, it's definitely been not one of the best. Unfortunately. We'll have to see what the next one's going to be like. So yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.